now, your True Adventure host, Bill Burrud.
Hi there, this is Bill Burrud saying welcome to Adventure. True adventure filmed as it happens throughout our fascinating world. You see these? Bet you can't guess what they are. W-2 forms, income tax, insurance, leases, licenses, all the paraphernalia of modern civilized life. Well, we're going to meet a man who's turned his back on red tape entirely and has chosen in its place a life of true adventure. Many men seek adventure. Some spend weeks, months, even years facing the unknown, meeting the exciting challenge of the elements. But few men in this day and age would spend 30 years of their lives in the wilds completely alone, as our man has done. Yes, 30 fantastic years he's lived in the Idaho primitive area. I think you'll be amazed and thrilled with his story. You know, I've often wondered if there still exists a pioneer spirit in America, so I sent our camera reporter Milos Kinshaw to find out. The story he brought back is a great one. Milos says this man is by no means a hermit. He welcomes visitors. He's a great conversationalist. He's well educated. He's attended 3 universities before beginning his unusual life in the wilderness. You may wonder what makes such a man leave our civilized world behind, but I don't know. Looking at these forms, income tax, and so on, you may end up wanting to join him in a life of genuine, true adventure. In an age of 1,000 modern comforts and conveniences, one man has chosen to live alone on a mountain in the wildest section of the United States, with no conveniences except those he can make with his own hands. Here by Idaho's Salmon River, the river of no return, lives Buckskin Billy. He's a legend, a rugged individualist, but a genuine, true adventurer. His stockade fence, his home, his cooking utensils, his weapons, most of his clothes, he makes himself. Buckskin was born in the Oklahoma Territory in 1906 and given the highly civilized name of Sylvan A. Hart. From his family, he inherited a love of the earth. Today, he enjoys growing all of his own vegetables. Almost every variety you can think of: onions, okra, beans, eggplant, tomatoes, carrots, potatoes, everything. And he's an excellent cook. Has a house full of cookbooks and studies them night after night. And I hear tell that you'd be considered very lucky if you get snowed in for a few days and have some of Billy's cooking. Now, Billy lives alone, but that doesn't mean he dislikes people. No, sir. Billy loves company. And during the winter, he enjoys meeting the hunters who may come by. He's glad to help them. Sometimes picks up the only real money he ever gets by skinning elk for them. But for most of the year, he's content. Content to be alone with only his black cat, Panther, to talk to. Panther, by the way, is a Manx cat who behaves exactly like a dog. You know, we've become so used to civilized comforts that we wonder what kind of a man would want to build his own house, make his door handles out of deer horns, or his chairs of antlers and rope. Oh, we'll make a couple of do-it-yourself projects to please our wives, maybe, but chopping the trees and hewing the lumber for every inch of our home, our barn, our fence, well, that's going too far. Especially when there are chickens to feed or strawberries to gather. Of course, Billy wouldn't have anything to sort the berries in if he hadn't made his own bowls. That's right. All of his pots and pans and bowls he makes of copper and brass. Oh, I know what you're saying now. The natural question is, where does he get the metal?
Well, around 1880, gold miners were bringing tons of metal equipment into this area by pack train. And when they left, they abandoned the heavy equipment along with the mines. There it stands today, like a sort of copper mine for Billy. And so piece by piece, he carries it home, melts it, shapes it in the molds that he's made himself, pounds it into the final design, and presto, a beautiful bowl. Or a tea kettle, or a pot, or a pan, or a tub. No trouble at all. How did all this start? Well, in Billy's family, there was a tradition many years ago. Every male in the clan had to live 1 year in the wilds. His father lived his term with the Cree Indians, but Buckskin decided to go it alone in the Idaho primitive area. That was in the year 1932. He went there to live 1 year, decided never to leave. He came out in 1942, though, to serve in the Air Corps as a bombardier. But now, back in his secluded home, he makes his own old-fashioned weapons as well as the machine that rifles the inside of the barrels and the molds in which he makes the parts. He finishes by carving the beautiful designs that you're looking at right now. An amazing man. Oh, he's an expert marksman, and old-fashioned as those weapons may be, it really hits. That was a gallon can. Buckskin is not without his pride. He'll gladly show you his hunting trophies. But one of his favorite hobbies is the study of Indian lore. By day, he hunts for arrowheads, and by night, he reads volumes on the subject. He's really an authority on Indian Sign Language, though he's never really had to put it to use. Living 50 miles from the nearest town, Buckskin doesn't get too much company, but his nearest neighbor, Al Tice, does drop by now and then. He lives about 15 miles downstream. In this country, almost all travel is by boat. There are no roads. There's no mail delivery. When people are going up Billy's way, they take along his mail, which may have been accumulating for 4 or 5 months. Boy, would I like to trade places sometime. Well, Al Tice has come to ask Billy to act as a guide for the next group of fishermen at his sportsman's camp. Buckskin, he's raring to go. And so the next day, Buckskin Billy starts out on his trip. He begins mulling over the stories he'll tell the civilized folks around the campfire. Oh, they always like his stories. Maybe he'll tell them about the many times he's been snowed in up there for weeks and weeks. That always gets him. Or maybe some of his hair-raising adventures with the grizzlies. The grizzlies, people say, aren't supposed to be in Idaho. But I guess nobody told the bears that. It doesn't occur to Buckskin Billy that traveling in a homemade canoe is an adventure. He made the ribs of dogwood, covered them with canvas, painted the whole thing with airplane dope, and in this canoe, he rides the rapids of the river of no return. But it's not an adventure, because he does it all the time. You see, that's the amazing part about this man and his story. What he's been doing as routine for nearly 30 years would be high adventure for most of us on a 3-day weekend, but not to Billy. The Buckskin, by the way, says that this is the only way to run the rapids, the only way you can see the rocks up ahead. Oh, this isn't necessary, but Billy thinks it's fun. He says, you know, people die because they lose their morale and their desire to live. By that standard, I think Billy's going to live forever because he's in a rapid right now. In an age of too many lazy thinkers and crowd followers, it's a real treat to see an individual like Buckskin Billy. Here's a courageous man who does as he pleases, free of civilized red tape, but he's facing every day nature at her roughest. Hang on, Billy. At the airstrip at Mackey Bar, he'll meet Al Tice and start on the next leg of his journey. Now, this is an adventure to Billy, a ride in an airplane and a human being to talk to. Why, he looks forward to it eagerly. They'll fly into the very heart of the Idaho primitive area. Al Tice is used to hopping all over the countryside in his plane. Al says this is the only way to get where you're going in this country, and look at it. Untamed virgin land, which is destined to remain that way forever. It's been set aside by the government. It's just about the only primitive area in our country. Look at that herd of elk. What a sportsman's paradise, but tough to get into. The ranch that Al Tice runs solves the travel problem by flying hunters and fishermen in and providing comfortable lodging. In the 1800s, Stonebreaker Ranch was a stopping place for weary miners traveling by pack train on their way to find gold. What stories these buildings could tell if they could speak. Stories of frontier America. They land right in front of the ranch. In a little while, the fishermen, the folks from the civilized big city will arrive. Buckskin will hear news of the modern world, the world he left behind. The men will talk about war and rumor of war. And Buckskin, well, he'll worry with them, but then he'll talk of other things. Perhaps teach them something about his world, why he chose a life of a true adventurer in the Idaho primitive area. Here in the Chamberlain Basin, the very heart of America's most rugged territory where wildlife abounds, Buckskin Billy is enjoying a rare holiday. For the moment, he's free of his summer job of preparing himself for the hard winter ahead, because he's going to take care of some sportsmen from the big city. Sportsmen who are coming here for a taste of true adventure. Billy's come here to get away from it all. I guess it's all in your point of view. The weather's perfect. Billy can see the fishing's going to be great. Having landed at the nearest airport, the sportsmen are brought to the ranch in a wagon. Their charter plane was too large to land at the ranch. They're really raring to go and catch the big ones they've been hearing about. For 50 weeks, they've been struggling in some office building somewhere. And while they fish, Buckskin, he'll prepare for their return back to civilization. He checks his knives, this one for cleaning fish, this one for skinning elk. He's got about 150 knives, each with a single special purpose, and he knows how to use them. Buckskin claims that you could survive forever, anywhere in the world with only a good knife and the knowledge of how to use it. He has one special prize in his collection, an Indian knife made of obsidian. He actually uses this stone to clean fish and says it's one of the best knives he's ever had. While he's making ready for them, the sportsmen are having a field day. The big ones are jumping. And when they bring them in, they'll learn that Buckskin Billy's an expert at smoking fish. They can carry some of their catch home to their families. But smoking fish is not as simple as just lighting a fire. First of all, Billy says you have to know the right kind of wood, not pine, it's too oily. Hardwoods are best, like birch. And though this isn't the hunting season, Buckskin's going to show the men how he skins an elk in the wintertime. A little advance advertising. But after a delicious salmon dinner, Buckskin lets the men in on a few of his trade secrets, like the care and feeding of a good, faithful rifle. And then gives them a small fireworks display. Then they all settle back to listen. Listen while Buckskin Billy spins out his amazing stories. He even tells one in Indian Sign Language, translating as he goes along, and holds everybody spellbound. Well, to Buckskin, those were 3 fine days with those sportsmen from the big city, but now Buckskin has got to get back on the job. You see, winter is on the way. There's lots to do. He's got to catch more fish, hang and smoke them. He's got to live on them. He's got to make repairs around the place, can all that produce that he was growing all summer long, and then check his trails. You remember I told you Billy makes his own guns? Well, that's nothing compared to loading them. Now let's take this old flintlock, for instance. What you're going to see turns back the clock of 50 to 100 years in civilization for us. After measuring out the right amount of powder, he pours it carefully in the barrel, pushes it down with a ramrod. Then he takes a piece of wadding, like he's doing right here, and places it over the top of the barrel. On top of the wadding, he puts the ball. That's the bullet right there. Tamps it down. And with a knife, one just right for this job, of course, he cuts off the excess wadding and rams the ball and wadding into the barrel. There we go. And removes the ramrod, replaces it in its storage place beneath the barrel. All this time, of course, he's being charged by an angry grizzly. But is he through? No, sir. He places more powder in a cup in the flintlock. The hammer will strike the flint, which will ignite the powder, which will burn down to the powder inside the barrel, and boom, that's it. And before you say that this isn't done, well, it was done for years and years till we got our modern rifles. Loaded gun in hand, he sets off now to check the trails. Remember, Buckskin has lived here alone for 30 years. In that time, well, he's pretty well made his own world. And I think what he's accomplished single-handedly is amazing. Like an Indian, Billy's alert to the many signs that he can read. A bear's been here clawing this trunk. This hand-hewn bridge is Buckskin's work. But everything has to be checked for safety. Living in the wilderness for 30 years, Billy's learned this. In the winter, he'll have to use his trails and bridges for survival. He'll hunt elk and deer for food. By the way, he'll charge you $4 to skin an elk. Now, I think most folks would charge $30 for a job like that. But you see, Buckskin's philosophy is different from the modern point of view. He says, shucks, I'd rather be independently poor than independently wealthy. He figures a rich man is anything but independent. Rich man spends all his time protecting his money, investing it, counting it, paying taxes on it. Buckskin Billy's poor monetarily, but I guess he's just about the most independent man I ever saw. He has a lot to do to survive, but he's got a lot of time to do it in. No appointments to keep, and no papers to sign. Oh, he makes another discovery here for us. It's a print that proves that there are grizzlies in this area. He says they're coming in from Montana. They're mean ones and big. Now, here's another example of Billy's achievements. How to survive in the wilderness for 30 years. An example of common sense. If the spring floodwaters rise and cover your trails, hang another trail on the side of a cliff. Simple? Certainly. But be sure it's secure. Obviously, this man has acquired engineering abilities along with everything else. Well, he figures he chose this life alone in an untamed land. He better make it work. I think he's done a fabulous job of it. He didn't come here to get away from people. No, sir. He came here to get close to companions like these, to watch and listen to the unmanufactured beauty of nature. How far do we have to travel to see sights like this? Hundreds of miles. While Billy has them in his own backyard. True, we can reach into the freezer for ice cream, get water from a faucet. Our lights are electric, our chairs are upholstered. But you know, in our hearts, most of us know we're missing something. Was man born just to find ease and comfort? Or was he born to create, to discover and to conquer frontiers? We know what Buckskin Billy's answer would be. And maybe our answer would be the same. Now that we've spent some time with this amazing and wonderful true adventurer.
Ladies and gentlemen, I want you to meet our special guest, Milos Kinshaw, who photographed this picture for us. Milos is one of the better-known adventure cameramen and reporters in Hollywood, and a real fine guy to boot. Milos, I think it'd be interesting for you to tell our friends your impression of Buckskin Billy. Is he really a believable character when you're with him?
Well, Bill, he's a most unusual person. There's no doubt about that. Buckskin Billy, as was brought out in the film, is a very well-educated man. He's a fellow that has many and varied interests. I think it's interesting to note that his hobby is archaeology. Throughout the area, there are numerous caves, ancient Indian campgrounds, and in his spare time, he spends his time looking around in these old areas for anything that might have something to do with the early life of the Indians. He's also quite an expert on Indian Sign Language, has all the books and everything that he can get on that particular subject. Now, who he's going to use the Indian Sign Language on, I have no idea, because he's up there all by himself.
Milos, there's a lot of parents watching, and I'm a parent, you know, and I'm always saying to my boy, if you just live like they did in the old days. Now, the youngsters have seen how they lived in the old days. Would you really trade yourself?
I don't think I would, Bill, to be honest with you, but for this particular person, Buckskin Billy Hart, this is really the way of life that he likes. After living with him for a week, I can see how he has certain things that you and I have not been able to achieve. He certainly has complete freedom. He's his own boss. He doesn't have to answer to anybody for his actions.
How about staples and supply? Does he get something from the store occasionally, then?
Once a year, he goes into McCall, Idaho, and with the little money that he makes skinning elk for hunters and cleaning fish occasionally throughout the year, he manages to save just enough money to go in and buy his staples, salt, gunpowder, and things of that nature.
Well, Milos, I want to thank you very much for being with us, and I have a gift for you. Here is a W-2 form. for you to keep. I want to thank you for being on the program. And ladies and gentlemen, I want to thank you out there for sharing this true adventure with us. Until we meet once again, this is Bill Burrud saying, may all your adventures be happy ones.